Are you searching for how to fix high hip or lateral pelvic tilt? By the end of this video, you will learn how to improve a lateral pelvic tilt with a simple movement retraining exercise. You might also be interested in my last video, so you might want to check it out at the link below. If you want to learn how to retrain your body and then movement safely and then effectively and then move better, subscribe to my channel and hit the bell to be notified when I post a new video every week. I am Taro Iwamoto. I am a Feldenkrais practitioner. With my backgrounds in athletic training, physical therapy, martial arts, and the Feldenkrais method, I have helped many people like you overcome and then move beyond the pain and the limitations. Now it's your turn, and let's dive in. So what is lateral pelvic tilt? It describes the position of the pelvis in the frontal plane. So if you look at both sides of the pelvis, and if I'm doing like this, and you can see my one side is higher, the other side is lower. And so that, now I have a lateral pelvic tilt. You could have the other way too, right? So in any case, yeah, so if I do have a lateral pelvic tilt, and then you can see one side of the spine is shorter, and then the other side of the spine is longer. So it does influence the spine and position of the spine as well. So what contributes to lateral pelvic tilt? So there's a structural component as well, and meaning the difference in length or the shape of the pelvis, length of the legs. If one leg is longer than the other side, and then that causes the pelvis one side to be higher, right? And so that there isn't really much that you can do and to change that structure from exercise perspective. However, there's another component that influences the lateral pelvic tilt, which is the movement bias. We all have a movement bias, the way that we sit, the way we stand. So for example, if you're sitting right now, we all have a way to sit and then lean over one side, right? So for me, I tend to lean over to my left side. You can see I'm exaggerating my movement bias. Okay, to a certain degree, we all have lateral pelvic tilt, right? And maybe so subtle that you don't even notice. But if you exaggerate the patterns, and then you can see clearly that I have the lateral pelvic tilt, right? Right side is shorter, left side is longer. So that's your movement bias. And the same thing if you're standing. As you stand, right? And most people, for a while, they hang on one leg, right? Doing this, or doing like that, right? And sometimes maybe we switch between the two sides. But more often, people find that habitually leaning over to one side. Okay, so you can observe yourself right now. You can do both in sitting and both in standing. So you can just be easier if you close your eyes and then just without really being so conscious about how you're sitting. So just to sit how you normally sit, and then you can see, you can probably feel which side are you leaning onto. Are you sitting more heavily onto the left side or more heavily onto the right side? And you can shift into that direction a little bit further, and you will probably know the habitual side is easier to move into, and then moving into the opposite side, non-habitual side, is a little bit harder to move into. It takes a little more effort because you're not used to moving into that direction. So comment below, and which leg are you standing on? In sitting, you check that, and then in standing, stand. Okay, and you can see, maybe subtle, but if you pay close attention, then you can maybe sense that you're standing on one leg heavily, more heavily than the other leg. And then is it easy to hang on one leg, left leg, or the right leg? And is there consistency between sitting and standing? More often than not, and people tend to be standing and weight bearing on the same side, meaning that they are really, that's the lateral pelvic tilt in one direction is pretty much their habitual movement patterns. And that is important to recognize that, okay? Because if you are going to improve your lateral pelvic tilt, which is your movement bias, you want to know which direction is your bias, right? And so you can start to change that. So now that you know your bias, and then let's do a simple movement retraining exercise to improve your lateral pelvic tilt or to fix it. And only thing you're going to need for this exercise is chair, relatively firm chair would be nice, and then also a towel or the blanket. So you're going to roll it up like so. And what you're going to do, you're going to take this and put it lengthwise, not crosswise, but the lengthwise, and put it right in the middle of the chair. And then you're going to sit right in the between, so that your right sit bone is to the right and left sit bone is to the left side of the blanket or the towel, rolled up towel, okay? And feet flat, so feet are not hanging up in the air, so make sure that the feet are on the ground. And from here, it doesn't matter which way you go, but I tend to choose from my habitual side. So if, for me, going to this way is my habitual side. So I start moving into that side. So I'm going to roll the pelvis a little bit to the left side. So lowering the left sit bone closer to my chair, which means that right sit bone is going to move a little bit further away from the chair, exaggerating my own habitual patterns, bias, right? And then returning to the middle, right here, okay? And slowly moving into the habitual patterns. So you're becoming familiar with your own movement bias, and then moving out of that pattern. So I'll take my time and to do it maybe like one minute, 2 minutes, and do it slowly. It's not really a strengthening or stretching exercise. It is more just retraining your brain and helping the brain recognize your own habitual bias so that the brain starts to actually see and other non-habitual patterns, and it starts to move you out of that habitual patterns. So that's the purpose. So I don't really focus on how far you go. In fact, it's probably best that you stay within a small range. Because the improvement really happens from the changes in the nervous system, in the movement patterns, rather than actual muscles, because the brain sends signals or orders the muscles to move, right? So that's why stretching the muscles and strengthening the muscles are not going to change all that much. Maybe change it for a short period of time, but then soon you revert back to the same patterns because that's your habitual bias, right? And now that you've done your habitual movement patterns, now you're going to the non-habitual movement patterns. So for me, going to move into this direction, that's habitual. It's a little bit harder first. So I'm rolling the pelvis to the right, moving my pelvis downward. Right side goes down and the left side goes up. But I'm not really forcing anything. It's just easy. So the roller, the blanket makes it easy to just roll the pelvis just a little bit to the right and back to the middle. A little bit to the left, back to the middle, so forth. So take another minute or two, going slowly and getting used to a different movement pattern for you. Okay, so the non-habitual movement pattern, meaning that's a harder directions, not because the muscles are tight, but because the brain, your nervous system really doesn't recognize that pattern so well. You don't use it. And that's why it's harder. It feels harder. It feels more effort, right? But believe it or not, as you do that with such a small movement and such a slow pace, as the brain starts to recognize that patterns and it becomes more familiar with it, and the movement becomes much, much smoother and easier. And so that's the difference between retraining and movement patterns versus stretching and strengthening. There. Okay, and then you can alternate left, middle, and right. and in the middle, so that you have the ability to move into your habitual patterns, and you also have the ability to move out of your habitual patterns and move into the opposite directions. So you have the ability to move in and out, and that's the key thing, right? So the habitual means, but basically you are not aware of it, so therefore for the most part you're stuck in the same patterns. Okay, and that's it. So after you've done that, right, it take about 5 minutes or so to really go through that movements, one direction, the other directions, and combine both directions. And then you stand up and you sit down, and you can really check again here the height, pelvis, your lateral pelvic tilt, and notice the changes from the beginning. Just doing the few minutes of rolling the pelvis left and right. That's it. It's so simple, right? And what does that tell you? What does that teach you? Right? It's not about stretching and strengthening the muscles. It is about retraining your brain, your nervous system, so that the movement patterns starts to change, right? So that you're now no longer stuck in your movement bias. That is either this way or either that way, right? So you have the ability to move into that directions or also move into the other directions. That's the key thing. All right, and let me know in the comment below, and after going through this simple movement exercise, and what was your experience? Did that change your lateral pelvic tilt? And were you surprised how easy movement can change your bias and that lateral pelvic tilt so quickly? If you want to improve your back pain, be sure to grab your free movement guide to pain-free back at the link below. Check out these videos, and if you like this video, and hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe and share with your friends. Comment below how helpful you found this video was. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video. Happy mindful movement. Bye bye.